What is the movie The Princess Bride really about? You might say sword fights, pirates and princesses, or henchmen who speak and rhyme.
Probably he means no harm.
He's very, very short on charm.
But what if I told you that The Princess Bride is ultimately a story of reconciliation?
Inconceivable.
Reconciliation stories focus around one central idea: the reuniting of characters in conflict with one another. These stories come in a variety of forms and styles, so today we're going to be contrasting two different examples: the grandson and grandfather storyline from The Princess Bride, and the episode Leslie and Ron from Season 7 of Parks and Rec. Spoiler warning for both. The grandfather-grandson storyline from The Princess Bride is as stripped down a reconciliation tale as you can have, making it the perfect example for examining the basic structure of this story type.
I'm explaining to you.
For as little screen time as it takes up, this storyline still contains the key ingredients of reconciliation stories: pre-existing conflict, the crucible, opposing views and strategies, truce, and understanding and resolution. Later, we'll examine a more complex reconciliation storyline in Parks and Rec to see how other story elements can be added to this basic structure. Our story begins with a young boy sick in bed receiving an unwanted visit from his grandfather. Here we have our pre-existing conflict. The boy thinks his grandfather is odd and doesn't want to spend time with him. This is the problem that will need to be overcome by the story's end. The key element of reconciliation stories is the crucible. This is the situation or plot element that forces two characters who are at odds to spend time in close proximity. It's this forced proximity that generates the conflict which will ultimately lead to our characters bonding, like metals in a crucible. This is why so many reconciliation stories place two characters in a car or send them on a long journey, forcing them to spend time with each other and work out their differences. In The Princess Bride, the crucible takes the form of the boy's sickness. He can't get out of bed, forcing him to spend time with his grandfather and listen to his story. Throughout the film, we see our two characters' opposing views and strategies. The impatient boy wants to skip over the romantic elements.
Is this a kissing book?
And for the story to move quicker and resolve itself the way he thinks it should go. The grandfather, conversely, insists on reading the story as it is written. They reach a gradual truce through mutual concession. The boy apologizes for his impatience, and the grandfather agrees to skip the kissing parts. By the film's end, our characters achieve understanding and resolution. Through spending time together, the boy has come to appreciate the loving attention of his grandfather, as demonstrated by his request that the old man return the next day to read the story to him again. His grandfather responds to this request with one of cinema's most memorable substitutions for "I love you."
As you wish.
Now that we have our baseline established for a reconciliation scene, what happens when we look at a more complex example? One in which the reconciliation isn't something happening in the background of another narrative, but is itself the primary focus of the plot. What happens when both characters are thrust into the crucible against their will and forced to reconcile? After all, in our Princess Bride example, the grandson is the only one resisting reconciliation, and consequently the only one who truly changes. In the Parks and Rec episode, fittingly titled Leslie and Ron, both characters start out resisting reconciliation, so both characters will need to change by story's end. Being that Leslie and Ron is a reconciliation story that takes up an entire episode of television, there are more ingredients at play in addition to the staples laid out in The Princess Bride. These additional elements are mystery, ticking clock, and revelation. So let's unpack this. The final season of Parks and Rec begins with a time jump from the previous season. We spend the first few episodes playing catch up and learn that sometime during the time jump, Leslie and Ron suffered a bitter falling out which ended their friendship. This is our pre-existing conflict, just like the grandson's aversion to his grandfather in The Princess Bride. An added story element in this example, however, is mystery. We know Ron and Leslie are on the outs, but we don't know why. Throughout the first few episodes of the final season, we're given clues, but it's not outright stated what they're fighting about. Not only does this added element of mystery pique our curiosity, it also strikes us as realistically human. In real-life conflict, there is often an element of mystery, with neither side 100% clear on what the conflict is really about. The crucible in this story comes when Leslie and Ron are locked in the Parks and Rec office by Leslie's husband Ben, who tells them they have until morning to work out their differences. To form the crucible of this story, the writers of Parks and Rec employ a TV writing device known as the bottle episode, a story in which the entire plot takes place in one setting. This is a perfect structure for a reconciliation story. The isolated setting puts us in the mindset of the characters, trapped in a box and forced to confront their issues with each other. The structure of this episode also adds another powerful story element, a ticking clock. Leslie and Ron are locked in for the night and will be let out in the morning. Thus, their crucible will not last forever, only for a few hours. If they cannot reconcile during that time, they will go their separate ways and may never reconnect. This adds a layer of tension. They're in a race against time. Where this episode really gets interesting as a character study is when breaking down opposing views and strategies. Throughout Parks and Rec, Leslie is shown as the unstoppable force, while Ron is the immovable object. We see these two mindsets clash when they're thrown into the crucible. Leslie immediately goes into action, viewing their conflict like a problem to be solved. She devises various schemes to force Ron to talk with her and creates increasingly elaborate timelines and diagrams to try and figure out the solution. Ron, conversely, chooses retreat, refusing to talk or to participate in Leslie's analysis, even going so far as to set off an explosive to escape the crucible. When this fails, he, in true Ron Swanson fashion, whittles a key out of wood and locks himself in his office, finding a way to hide even within the crucible itself. Ron attempts one last escape by pulling the fire alarm, but succeeds only in setting off the sprinklers, leaving him and Leslie soaked and forcing them to change into goofy clothes. This seemingly innocuous event serves as the catalyst to Ron and Leslie's truce. By changing out of their normal clothes, Ron and Leslie symbolically remove their armor. It's only once they're in this more casual, disarmed attire that Leslie, and especially Ron, let their guards down and finally talk. With the added element of mystery in Ron and Leslie's story comes the equally necessary element of revelation. Earlier in the episode, we learn the primary reason for Leslie's anger. Ron's building company demolished the old home of Leslie's best friend. But it's only after the truce that we learn the secret behind Ron's anger. He got lonely when the old Parks and Rec staff all left to go work with Leslie. Ron reveals that he had planned on asking Leslie for a job at a lunch meeting, but Leslie, caught up in her usual state of busyness, forgot about their lunch, preventing Ron from ever asking her the question. Ron's confession reveals much more than the reason behind the feud. It reveals something about his character. Throughout the run of Parks and Rec, Ron presents as a self-sufficient man who doesn't need anyone or anything. It's only now that we realize just how much he cares about those around him, even willing to work for the federal government, an institution he despises, to be with them. The reason behind his anger is poignantly clear. He wasn't mad at Leslie, he was mad at himself, frustrated by his own humanity and need for friendship. Ron's moment of vulnerable honesty ultimately leads to understanding and reconciliation. Ron and Leslie, having gained deeper perspective of each other, apologize and reunite as friends. They rearrange the office back to how it used to be, symbolically rebuilding their friendship in the process. The reconciliation of Ron and Leslie is so effective because it is so thoroughly based in character. Their wildly different personalities provide a logical basis for their feud, but their ultimate respect and love for each other provide an equally logical basis for their reconciliation. Through The Princess Bride and Parks and Rec, we can see the structure for effective reconciliation stories. Existing conflict, a crucible, opposing views, a truce, and finally, understanding. These stories remind us of the importance of grace and communication, and the enduring power of selfless love.
As you wish.
So I hope this helps. Comment below with any other story types that you'd like to see covered in a video, and subscribe for more writing tips.